Pat Stevens, our highway superintendent, is going to do a presentation on the current condition of our highway garage facility. Evan.
All right. Yeah. So I put some stuff together just to go over the existing conditions and operational deficiencies of the highway garage. We've been looking at this a lot. When I started, it was a topic that was a major one for our employees and for the department, so that we can maintain services to the town. Since then, we've kind of gotten into what the plan of attack should be to deal with this, but we really wanted to start by bringing as much information forward about the existing conditions as we could. I've been there long enough now to kind of do my own assessment on it, so that's primarily what this is tonight, is to highlight some of the issues that we have down there. So we'll start. So this slide, I'll try to give you an idea of what the picture is on each one. That's currently the back of the building, the main building, which is the primary building that was built back in 1969. So it's over 50 years old and is in dire need of replacement, but it is our primary building. It houses our administrative staff, our mechanic shop, our fabrication shops, and about 14 of our largest trucks live in this building. This is the back side of it. You can see some siding deficiencies from being hit over the years and just being worn out, and a couple pieces of equipment there. So the current issues are pretty much throughout. We have electrical, heating, exterior facade, structural deterioration, superstructure deterioration. It's a prefabricated steel building with a metal shell, and that prefabricated steel structure, superstructure, has begun to fail from wear and tear and exposure over the years. And then on top of that, insufficient space for office, mechanical garage, and equipment storage throughout. The current facility does not support our current operations. We had an article in the Webster today that spoke to the Cliffy Jones building and several other buildings that have been added on and supplemented over the years. So we've already expanded into 2 buildings. That second building has been expanded close to half a dozen times over the years to do that. And that's beyond the main building, which is our oldest. So there's really been a lot of expansion just to continue to operate, but in no way is any of it cohesive or really functioning at the level it should be to maintain the service we are. So investing in the current facility will not provide the needed space or upgrades to the department, as the department size has grown to more than double when the original building was built, and will continue to grow as the population of the town grows. Until the new facility is constructed, there is a risk at all times that the current facility will fail. This would result in large expenditures in temporary relocation and efforts for potential disruption to service provided by the department. So if something was to happen to this building, and it's in a state that it could anytime, there'd be damage to all the trucks, we wouldn't be able to operate, so you'd have to relocate. That would be a very expensive process. I'm guessing in the millions to find a new location, set up, operate out of that location in a temporary format until the new building could be built. So waiting to that point is really just the worst case scenario as far as overall cost to this place. So we have repair, replace the top. The option is to replace. And for all the reasons I just stated, the biggest one being that even if you brought this one up to code, did all kinds of repairs, it is inadequate space-wise and functional ways for the department's current needs. Forget planning for the future, which, you know, Webster's still going to grow, so we need the services we offer to grow with it. So jumping right into some of the issues, the first slide is structural issues. The first picture there is the foreman's office. The next one is the area for the fire alarm, telephone, and security panels. A lot of rewiring and splicing over the years. And the next one is the current location for our switches and routers that control the internet. Understanding that probably, most likely when the building was built, was a closet, because you didn't need any of the equipment in that room when the building was built, because you didn't have that technology, but basically being of internet, wireless things in nature. So that's sort of how some of these conditions get there. The first foreman office is a good example of how much rewiring has been done, and it just sort of has been added on, and literally run across the ceiling for years to get to its current state. So this is essentially decades of resplicing, adding on to outdated systems and infrastructure throughout the building. It's a major risk to safety on a daily basis. Any of this stuff could fail. It has hazard risks with the way it's connected, and the lack of continuity doesn't allow for a lot of troubleshooting and testing. It's more just making sure it functions than it is making sure it functions properly. So that's one of the issues. The other section under structural is a bit more literal. I talked about the steel superstructure. The first photo there is a little bit farther back picture of what every post, I would say, in the main building looks like. They begin to deteriorate at the base at a pretty rapid rate. The second picture shows some of the siding on the roof that continues to come apart, and then all the way to the right-hand side of the screen is a post that actually currently has a hole in it. That's at the front corner of the mechanics shop. So it's a result of 50 years of service, water, and salt in a lot of ways. We deal with a lot of those products in order to keep the roads safe. They come into our buildings and they're washed and cleaned out of our buildings, but over that amount of time they still affect all of the structure. So this building, as I said, houses 14 of our mainline trucks. Current market value of those 14 trucks is about $4 million. So if this building was to fail, that would be what would go along with it at this time. The next section is staff facilities. So these are the facilities that the staff utilize on a daily basis. The biggest overall issues with these is that the facility was designed for roughly a staff of 18 back in the 60s. Now we have around 40 plus employees in the exact same space. It has been expanded and utilized to the maximum potential possible, but it's not. The actual photo to the right here is a picture of lockers that exist out in the shop area, which is basically an overflow issue that over the years, as people were added, the locker room that's there now did not support them, so they just started sticking lockers out in the mechanic and equipment storage areas to be able to store some of their gear. That's what that actual section there is, just on the side of the shop, actually next to some of the pieces of equipment. So because of its undersize, it lacks cohesive design. The facilities were sort of piecemealed together. Now, that was done well, but the multiple additions is the issue. You have, when we go out for a full plow run, it's 18 trucks. 14 of them are in this main building. The other 4, plus some spares, are in a completely different building. You have to walk across the street to get to them. It lacks cohesion, it slows things down, it just makes things more complicated than it needs to be to have all your equipment scattered through multiple buildings and then multiple additions within those buildings. A lot of the staff facilities are also worn out from years of around-the-clock time and use, which is literally in the winter around the clock. And then in addition to that, the facilities no longer, while equipment and safety and regulations have continued to advance, the building can no longer keep up. It can no longer be advanced to a place where a building should be this day and age in order to take advantage of all the amenities that we could, technologies and even equipment that could be utilized. The building really can't support them anymore. So the next section of staff facilities. So you have a break room and kitchen, and then a locker room, and another version of the kitchen. So the issue with these areas is they're undersized for the 40 or 45 staff. The break room has 32 seats. The locker room has 17 full-size lockers that you'll see there in the center picture. That is the entire locker room. I'm not a small person, but I'm also not a large person either. And I can easily put the palms of my hands on the face of those lockers. So some of you have met some of the employees at the department and seen them. Picture them going around in there trying to get their gear on, especially in the winter, hard hats, boots, all the type of stuff they have to wear to go out in the weather in that, literally the space you see me standing in. It's amazing how small that area was. You almost wonder if it was large enough when it was built at this point. So basically about 3 people can fit in there, and they're not really in that good of spirits when there's 3 in there. So I put that they could fit uncomfortably at one time. There's no dedicated women's locker room at this time, or changing area. There's only just the bathroom that's the women's room, which doesn't allow us to work very well with a diverse workforce. The kitchen consists of 1 sink, 2 microwaves, 1 refrigerator, and an electric stove. So all 40 guys utilize 1 refrigerator if they want to keep their lunches cold, things of that nature. Any idea of really warming up your food or actually cooking something, during your lunch break is pretty much gone. The stove doesn't get utilized that much just because everybody has tailored their day to not use that area. So what you find mostly is people are sitting down to eat their stuff when they're all there at the same time. Primarily around the island you see in the picture, and then they utilize the 32 seats in the area, but that island isn't really made for seating. It's not where you're supposed to be sitting and eating. It's an area for preparing things and that type of stuff. So it's sort of just not being utilized the way it should be because of the lack of space that is needed for our current staff. Then we move on to the restroom facilities. These are also very, very undersized for the 40 or 45 people. The picture farthest to the right is one side of the men's room, and the picture in the center is the other side. You can actually see the top of the wash station in the bottom right-hand corner of the center picture, so it literally is the entire room. It's 1 urinal, 2 toilets, and 1 wash station for 40 employees. The women's restroom is all the way to the right, just a single toilet and sink. The biggest time you notice this, and it's noticeable all the time, there's constantly, I believe, people almost scheduling the use of this facility, but not in a formal way. But it really, during the winter snow removal, where we have 18 to 20 guys all coming in at once after a 4-hour plow run, where they've been in their trucks, say it's their second one, so they're on 8 hours, and they're getting ready to go on the 3rd run to make it 12 hours, and they're all trying to have a restroom break between when they're getting back out there, having to spend time waiting for somebody to go through here so that they get back out on the road and maintain them the way they should. That's the most noticeable time when this really stands out, but it's just incredibly undersized. After that, there's equipment storage. This photo here is a picture of the main garage that I keep talking about. This is actually more like 12 of the trucks, 11 or 12 of the trucks. The white wall in the back, there's a 4-bay addition that happened in the 70s. Beyond that, that holds 4 more trucks to bring it all the way to the 14 trucks. These have to be, this is somewhat of a complex parking situation, especially with the wings on. It doesn't allow for the proper clearance between the vehicles, and when employees have to walk in between these. So if I want to go see a guy at the back truck, you have to maneuver between these plows, around the posts, under the hose, next to the sink, all the way through there repeatedly in order to get through. It's really not an ideal place for anybody to be walking. It takes time to safely navigate it, and it's not always possible. It's very easy to trip, bend your knees, all that type of stuff, and that's how tightly most all of the equipment is packed in there. So along with those issues, the parking configurations, they don't allow for efficient, safe access to the vehicles, essentially. It doesn't matter which way you're trying to go, you always have to go over or around something, and that's going to yield the problems eventually. So this is another slide of the main garage also. So this is an example of the summertime without the plows on. You have trucks with tag trailers in there, and you can kind of get the proximity, how close they're parked together in order to get undercover and not be parked outside. So the main truck storage building is a nose-to-nose facility, which you actually saw better in the last picture. This requires for sometimes some complicated maneuvering and backing to get through the narrow doorways out, which each truck bay has its own doorway, so every truck backs out through a doorway every single time it's utilized. Every square inch of the facility is fully utilized and organized, but it's still not enough. The center picture is the lean-tos that were added to our salt barn. They contain the removable salters, and then underneath you'll see tucked the plow for each truck. So each one of those bays for a truck salter and a plow, and there is no space to spare under there. Yet you still see the plows to the lower right sitting outside, uncovered and unprotected, because there's no place to wedge those in any of the buildings. Clifford E. Jones, although it's structurally sound and something we hope we can continue to utilize, it also requires unorthodox parking configurations and is in severely limited clearance between equipment. So on the top right, you have a loader parked next to a flatbed truck, very, very close, tight. There's actually another piece of equipment in front of the loader also that you can't see well, and then a camera van is in front of the flatbed truck. So those are actually stacked double deep, where you have to move that loader or that truck in order to get either of those other two pieces out and utilize them, which takes more time, lacks efficiency. The center picture is a loader, our new wheeled excavator, another loader, and our low boy truck. That's how they are parked. As you can see, in order to get any of those back ones, the first one has to be taken out. It's just very inefficient. If you were to, and at times people can think maybe they can squeak one out, so they'll try to squeeze by, run into problems with that. The picture all the way to the right of the screen is our leaf machines as they are stored. That lean-to, which is on the back of Cliff E. Jones, you cannot even walk through, basically, at this point, without a lot of maneuvering up and down. So that's how that facility is maximized. Those are examples of that. So because of those issues, we have started to look at some concepts. The concept study that was referenced in Webster today, the objectives of that were efficient and effective utilization of the existing 20-acre campus and the newly acquired 8-acre parcel that's located directly to the north of the facility. Another objective was to locate the facilities to improve safety and operation, the main garage administrative building, the salt storage building, the yards, and to maintain, like I said, hopefully the use of the Cliff Jones building, since it is quite a lot newer and we still will need equipment storage space with that. And then another objective is to maintain the use of the existing facility during construction to reduce the town cost. Kind of goes to what we talked about earlier, that if something was to fail, we'd have to relocate. The property we have now is large enough that we can locate the new facility in a place that won't disrupt current operation. And that's kind of huge. Not having to relocate temporarily in order to build this facility is a major cost savings across the board, no matter how you figure it. And it will also allow us to maintain service, hopefully exactly the way we do now during that time. So you'll see no concerns of having greater downtime because the mechanics areas aren't our temporary setup versus a permanent. It would be a big advantage and kind of a testament to hopefully some of the planning we're able to do, that we're going to be able to keep the existing facility open and then utilize where that facility is now differently in the future. So with that, we will come to the board with a detailed presentation of the study findings on a later date, hopefully shortly here in the next few months. With this, we talk a lot about the existing conditions and obviously the need for replacement. The next steps are to develop an RFP for final permitting and design services for the facility. That would be so that we can get it designed, get more definitive designs where better estimates and things of that nature can be made. This will put us in, it'll put the project in an ideal position to apply for grants and be ready to move forward when those types of things come forward or when funding is secured. That's the goal here, and the urgency is basically the conditions that you just saw, that we're at risk of adding a lot of cost to this project by not doing it in a timely manner, in my opinion, since based on what I've seen so far of the facility, and there's just daily risks and concerns along with that for the staff mostly, whether it's in equipment or just using the facility that need to be upgraded. So that's the bulk of the information I have. How much time I took, but not too bad. So open it up to questions and comments.
You're the only game in town tonight.
I know, that doesn't mean I want to.
You could have taken more time
any more
if you
than
wanted to.
You did just
Okay, good.
perfect match.
Good. And timed it before, so you never know.
No, it's a great presentation. Pictures are very interesting. I know that facility's been in need of not only upgrades, been talking about replacing that for a number of years, but to see the actual pictures really brings it to the forefront with respect to the deterioration that is ongoing in that building. I completely agree with you with respect to the safety and potential damage come about if we don't address it soon. So,
Right.
are you what's your speculation with respect to timeline for an RFP to be put together? And
I've already spoken, so Mary, our town engineer, has been spearheading the uniformization of that to try to make what we're putting out for RFPs uniform. I think she's got a pretty good template now. I've already spoken to her about getting this ready. So I'm going to say we could probably have an RFP ready the next month, I believe, for those services without too much trouble. Get it advertised and all that type of thing. Like I said, that's really key, you know,
Right.
to at least move forward with those steps, so we can take advantage of opportunities that might come our way and really help with this effort.
so I know that you visited at least two highway garages that have been constructed in the last 5 years or so.
Yep.
And do you utilize any of that information with respect to formulating an RFP?
Yeah, to a certain extent, you start to see a lot of the same players being involved with it, people that have a lot of experience.
Right.
We're very fortunate that some of the concept work we're doing is done by probably one of the leaders in the design end of that, and they have been able to do 5 or 6 of these, I think, in Western New York in the past 10 years. And they pick up things from everything, and all of the tours that we did, there was definitely stuff on each of them where they said, don't do this, but we really like this. So there's at least a dozen items like that where you got to see exact examples of things that folks did that didn't work, and things that they did that they like a lot.
Right.
The type of building we foresee here is very similar to one consistent thing throughout that a lot of people like, and that was a one door in, one door out facility where you're not backing through doors to get out, and the efficiencies there. When we open up those 14 doors to go out for a plow run, there's not 1 ounce of hot air left in that building. And it has to completely reheat itself. So it's a very inefficient setup. In addition to the other efficiencies, it definitely lacks efficiencies and even the basic level of that. A couple of the facilities we visited even said that their building was 2 or 3 times the size of what they had, and their utility bills went down annually.
So the other question I had for you with respect to grants, did you have an opportunity while you were visiting these other municipalities to talk to the superintendents there and the availability and awards of grants that they had experienced?
We compared notes a little bit. Didn't have anybody that had significant contribution from grants on the construction of their facility. Unfortunately, nobody I talked to had a program that they would really recommend or go through. Most of them bonded it and put it through that way. So I didn't get any great leads that way. But I know we've been talking a lot about it lately. We've applied for a couple of things in my short time here that we were hoping would come through. And I think we're at a point now that as soon as the RFP and everything goes, we're going to start to pursue that a little more aggressively. We're going to talk with WEDA, Matt Catfield is an excellent resource. He does a lot of great work, so we're going to be having some talks with him. And I believe the supervisor has set up actually a couple of things to maybe develop some strategies for this coming up too, in general, for grant getting. So unfortunately, I don't have any direct lines on really good programs specifically for this, but we're working through all our options and going to utilize everything we can to make sure we really vet everything we can and find everything that there is out there. Right? I'm hoping there's something significant.
How much would this project going to cost us? And are we gonna pay for this too? And also, thank you so much for the presentation.
Yeah, no problem. We're not at a point yet where we have exact plan. There's a few things in flux with the concept, so I don't feel it's appropriate right now to bring that information to the board directly. If it's something that I feel is going to change significantly, which I think it is, based on the really, really preliminary stuff, I want to get a little further into this design and get some stuff that's a little bit more concrete before we bring any numbers here. So I don't want anybody feeling one way or another, either very secure about it or very insecure about it. So the way I'll answer that is to say that right now, based on the concept, we don't exactly have an exact number. We really want to pursue some of this design and get things much more firm on exactly what we want to do before we want to start speculating price.
And, you know, along those lines, you know, you use the term concept and then RFP. We did, the board authorized a concept project with this, is MRB?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's correct.
And MRB, who has been pretty prominent in these new facilities in the last 5 to 10 years.
Very, yeah.
The way I kind of saw it was the concept work they've done is a combination of, one, where to put the facility on our 28 acres.
That was the biggest question coming into it by far. It was
Yeah.
we acquired the new 8-acre parcel
Right.
directly next door, which is really key to a lot of the things I said about keeping the facility open and all that type of stuff. But exactly where the building landed was still very much theoretical. So
And-
we've gotten that, you know, out of this. The concept has pretty much cleared that up, and we discussed a little bit with some of the alterations that have to be made to the size and different things based on
And
some
then-
recent information we got. And I don't think that changes, which is good. The location is still the location. It's just a matter of tailoring exactly how many people and what size it is and that type of stuff.
And you just, because the second thing about that concept was
Yeah,
kind of a moving target as you went on these visits and looked at the other places, pros, cons. MRB was trying to come up with some size based on parameters that we had, and that's been a moving target, and we've kind of done more in depth, and that's why really, we don't have any idea how much this thing is going to cost, because I think from the original concept, we're getting smaller on the size. And I'll hand it the time to Bill, because Bill, this is your bailiwick. I mean,
Well, we've got projections that came in with numbers of 70,000 plus residents and full build out of this town. And now after further research, we're finding that those numbers are 15,000 higher than where we think we're going to be. So we think the total build out will be somewhere between 55 and 60,000. You've got to design this building with that in mind, not maybe 70,000. So you build the building based on a projection of 55 or 60,000 people, and if you have to add to it later, you add to it later. You don't build it out at full build out at 70,000 and then only get a number in the town of 56,000 people. You're going to have dead space you're never going to use because you don't get the equipment because you don't have the roads to plow. So we need to fine tune that number and then go forward with the design. And that way we'll have a better handle on possible costs.
You know who I thought might come tonight, but he's probably got better things to do in his retirement, is Barry Dean.
sure.
He's watching.
No, he's not watching.
Isn't
Well,
he?
he might be now.
What is it? Is he on the 7th hole?
He was on, no, he was on the 19th hole.
Okay, well, there you go. Now, the man's retired. Let him be on the 19th hole for hours. But I remember he said something in a board meeting in the last couple of years since I've been on the board. The cost of a new truck or one of those plows that you have shoehorned underneath out of necessity and a need to, compare the cost in 2020 for that machinery versus what he remembers when he was the superintendent, the cost for a new truck is exponentially higher. I mean, I want to say in this, I want to, he was a superintendent from like 90 to 2008, right? I want to say he said, man, we were buying those trucks, those those huge things for like 80 grand, and what are they now?
260,000.
Yeah.
So having them not in a facility that protects them is a huge waste of our money. And I can't even imagine what they cost back in 1970 when that thing was built.
We invest the money in the equipment, and, you know, budget time is coming up, you'll hear me here talking about that some more, but it's literally the tools that are required to provide the services that we do, so we invest the money in those. So now to have a facility that isn't protecting them, isn't adequate, makes them, you know, prone to bump into each other, any little thing that's unnecessary, just it isn't something that should happen, isn't something that we can continue to have happen, because you're threatening all that investment we've already made in the equipment being squandered, which just is kind of terrible to think about.
Sure.
I work through the whole thing.
Yeah, and Dolly, I know you and I were just kind of, wow, these pictures, I mean, you know, they say the pictures are 1,000 words. I mean, and I don't really mean it. When you, are those support beams that are rotted out at the bottom?
Yeah.
Those are the vertical
That's
columns
great.
that hold up the walls,
Yeah, it's
hold up the roof.
pretty dramatic.
I wish I didn't ask that question. But I guess it had to be asked.
Some of our insurance agencies.
Yeah.
Well, they've been over there, over the years, I know that, right? You know,
The building department has been down, and yeah, had some comments. I mean, nobody knows, nobody thinks it's good, and it's just, you gotta quantify exactly how bad is it. Are we talking a year or 2 years? The next big windstorm? You know, it's just all up in the air. But
yeah.
there isn't any thought that it's something that we should let get around for, that's for sure, which is why we're trying to do what we can on our end to get the right pieces in place to be in a position to take care of this before it does become a problem. It's probably safe to say that we've been very lucky so far.
Yeah, I agree. And I think your documentation, your pictures will certainly send home the sense of urgency that is required here. And has been required, I would say, for a number of years.
Yeah, I think the general
I don't think
conditions
anybody
seem like
will
it's-
disagree with that.
Pat mentioned, I think you said it, the supervisor put something out earlier today about getting a group together about grants.
Grants,
To
yeah.
your question, John, about, you know, it's funny, I mean, the world we live in is moving so fast that when those garages were built, was it Canandaigua or Farmington and Cicero Road and whatever, rather quick, the funding grant opportunities that they had available to them, you know, aren't there, it looks like on the surface compared to what we have today. And one of the reasons I reached out to a group of people today, including Pat, is I said, look, with what we got going on in this town, the potential projects like this, we really need to get a think tank together. What is our strategy? What is our philosophy, our execution strategy on grants and where to find them for these projects? You know, I don't know enough to be dangerous, to be honest with you, to build share. Is this $1.2 trillion that the federal government just put out, you know, does this project qualify for that? I don't think it does, but I don't know.
You have to get the guidelines of what they're looking for. And I think the majority of that money is going towards infrastructure and roads.
Which is,
Right.
although this is connected, but it's not exactly, like you said, maybe,
You could try and apply and see what
maybe
happens.
something is peripherally connected to infrastructure.
We're not out anything by trying.
Well, it almost seems, Bill, like right now we're reacting to situations on grant opportunities. We know we don't have somebody in employment at the town of Webster whose job is to go for grants. The closest that we have to that is Matt Chatfield, who's the executive director of Webster Economic Development Alliance. And he's got a track record where he's brought us grants. And a lot of times it's he's telling us about these opportunities. Well, he says, you know, I don't know if I'm really out there looking for everything, and especially with what has happened in the last couple of years with what might be available. So that was why I said, you know, we need to get us in the room and say, you know, how are we going to go about this? So we're more kind of proactive on this than reactive on these grant opportunities. So in parallel, as Pat and Mary are putting together maybe an RFP, yeah, it's premature to go for any grant on this because, as you know, I'm learning, the closer you are to shovel ready, the more chance you got to get it. But in parallel to that, I want to make sure that we're really researching and got a plan on how to go get the most grant money for these type of projects as possible, because it really is simple math. Whatever this thing ends up costing, every dollar of grant money is one less dollar that we go into debt and bonding. When we bond and go into debt, that affects the town of Webster taxpayers on their town tax bill. It's as simple as that, you know. And I don't know, if something costs $10 million and you got a $10 million grant to do it, that's a heck of a lot easier decision for this town board to go forward with that project, huh? So, anyway.
Well, the tough thing is, with two of the major projects we have ongoing, well, one of the ones we have ongoing in this project is that they're being done out of necessity due to age of the facilities. Phase 2 and the highway garage. It's just the timing is very, very difficult. But the decisions that have to be made, they most certainly have to be made. I mean, we all saw the pictures that was presented by Art, and then again, then today by Pat, of his facility in the sewers treatment plant. And there was no question at all that these expenditures had to happen. It wasn't like, okay, we can set some money aside for the next 5 years, and then we won't have to spend that much money because we put it in a fund. It's just, we have to do it. So, looking at the best way to do it with respect to grant money, that's, to your point, Tom, I think it's,
Well,
we have to do that. And I'm glad.
I know this is not really a good political statement to make, but the town should not be doing two major projects like their sewer plant or their highway project at the same time. I think anybody, that's just common sense and logic. Spread those out where one happens and then the other one happens 10 years later. That's like right now us sitting there saying we're crying over spilled milk. The reality is that we're both built around the same time, right, Bill? We were both built around 50 years ago. And they're both aging out at the same time. And, you know, we can't go back in time and say,
No.
it's 2010, let's do this project now, and then in 2022 we'll do the other. We don't have that ability.